Okay, so Shine is back after a hiatus brought on by COVID. And I thought it was very apropos to kind of restart the rebirth of our Shine videos with Lisa Badger, who was about a year ago the first in our community to be tested and have COVID. So I appreciate her being here and sharing her story, because it's been a long year.
It's been a long year. It's been a challenge.
Wow. I also want to say that we're both outside, and I've been vaccinated. She's partially through, so we're safe. Now, I wanted to start out because disclaimer, I was Lisa's doctor during this, although I'm not her doctor anymore. So we're not going to violate any privacy issues. She's agreed to talk a little bit about her situation. But I guess I want to go back to when you first got sick, like the first day or two of fever. Like, were you just kind of like, oh, this is just a whatever, or did you know? Like, did you have a feeling?
I had a feeling that I was kind of trying to push away. I was fine up until then. You know, I was fine until I wasn't. And I work a lot. You know, I am on, 100 miles per hour all the time. The previous month or so, I had only had like 1 or 2 full days off of everything. So I knew that I was becoming a little run down, worn out.
Sure.
But I wasn't sick. It's just that habitual exhaustion we do to ourselves from going all the time. And so it was a regular day. I at the time had a very forward-facing job for a statewide elected official. Went and represented, the office.
So you were around a lot of, you were around a lot of people. That was your job.
In any given week, it's hundreds or thousands of
Shake
people.
Shake hands, talk to people.
Shaking hands, kissing babies, within the previous 2 weeks, being in the Capitol all the time, being at the governor's mansion for a few events. You're just around tons of people, and that's just my job. Then you take in other things that, I'm involved in the community, and you just are around tons of people. So, regular work day, and then I had a little bit of time, so I got my nails done. I think I stopped in the grocery store. I went to my park board meeting where, I'm elected to that board. And I even remember all day kind of making jokes with people about, I've got sanitizer right here. I always had it in front of me for other people to use if they wanted to. And then when I got done with that meeting, I actually skipped a different event because I was just like, man, it's, been a long day. Go home, settle down, just kind of sitting there watching TV. And I was like, I feel hot. I just feel so hot all of a sudden. So I got up and I took my temperature. This was maybe around 9 at night, and it was 101.5. And I took a picture of it.
Did you think you had the flu, though? Because it was kind of flu season.
I didn't know. I knew that I don't pop high fevers.
Right.
The only time I had popped a high fever like that was years before when I was working as a nurse for you, and I contracted the flu, know. And as a nurse, as a medical professional, we do tend to sometimes just poo-poo she our own symptoms. But I took a picture of it, I sent it to my mom, and I said, uh-oh. Because I was aware COVID was out there. I'd been following it for weeks and months with, my daughter and some of my friends, and just watching, and
Yeah, but that was a time, though, when it was more kind of on the West Coast, international travel. It wasn't where it was a community spread thing. But you still had that.
Yeah. But I had it in my mind. I had had a really long conversation with one of my girlfriends the Friday night at dinner before. And then when we ended dinner, we went home and we talked on the phone for 2 more hours about it. We're kind of information nerds, and so it wasn't breaking. I think it went up to like 101.8. So I took some ibuprofen, went to bed.
So when were you at the point where you're like, I think I need a test?
So the next morning I woke up and still had a really bad fever, had a terrible headache. My throat felt sore, but it felt sore like I had never had a sore throat before. It almost felt like it was just sitting in one certain spot in my throat. And so I was just like, I've never felt like this before. I've been sick before, but I've never felt like this. So I called your office, and, we started talking, these are the COVID symptoms.
Right, right.
What do we do? So, your staff and myself started calling like the COVID hotline. Couldn't get through. I finally got somebody to answer.
Yeah.
And she laughed and she said, I actually work for poison control. They just put us on these hotlines.
Right, because there was really nothing.
There was no system
there were
in place.
no testing centers or anything. Yeah.
So we just, called IDPH. We were going through what we were told to do.
Because at that time, IDPH only had a certain amount of tests per county. And I can't remember, I think it was like only 10. There weren't that many. And so you really had to prove your case in order to get a test.
And we didn't know that.
Right.
I mean, working in a doctor's office, somebody comes in, we're swabbing throats for strep all day, every day, So I didn't know that there was such a lack of testing at the time. And so jumping through these hoops, so they said, okay, you have to go to test for strep and flu.
And it had to be negative.
Yep, rule those out. So I went and I did that. And I went into the packed clinic and I asked for a mask. And they said, well, you're not coughing. And I said, I need a mask. Give me a mask. Like, it wasn't very nice. And then did the flu and the strep, and then went home. That came through pretty quick. And then literally on the phone for hours, sometime late that afternoon, I got a call from IDPH with the code to get the strep. But still at that time, nobody knew how to do it. There were no systems in place. So I pull up behind an express care, and a nurse comes out in full PPE. We hadn't seen anything like that
so it's
yet.
almost like whoosh, whoosh, like all the...
And I'm sick.
Yeah, and that's scary.
And there's a supervisor out there,
Yeah.
and they swab my throat and my nose because they don't know
which one,
what to do yet. So, went home. I let my mom in on it.
Right.
I had told a couple people, but really just staying home sick. I had a fever. Then that was Thursday evening. Friday they called me and said they needed to do it again. So go back through the whole thing again. And then just kind of waiting. And during this time I'm getting sicker, but I'm telling myself, no.
Yeah, but it's also kind of scary because at that time when we were getting those reports of people getting sick, that's when the sick people were dying, right?
That was
it wasn't like the in-between time where, okay, fever, cough, shortness of breath, you're going to be sick, but you're going to get better. It was, these people are dying. I mean,
in New York.
Because it was all the older people, the congregate setting. So that's pretty
seeing.
Scary shit.
Yeah.
To like,
in New York, you're seeing on Twitter that, they don't have PPE, they don't have beds, they, people are just basically, it seems like they're dropping like flies, and I'm like, when is this going to happen to me? So then Saturday I'm just waiting, and they start the press conference with all of the county and medical officials, and as soon as they start it, I get a call that it's positive.
Yeah, so you were basically the first. So what's that moment like?
Shock. Out of all of the people,
right?
And then where did I get it? What's going to happen?
Or even the people that I've been around.
Exactly. I mean, I was immediately concerned for everyone I had been around. It just it was shock. It was fear, but it was also an immediate internal tool that I have that I'm trying to take care of everyone else.
Well, I that's interesting that you say that, because before we started this, she actually showed me kind of a diary video that Lisa had made when she found out she was positive and she was sick. And I think the most profound part of that is how scared you were, but really how scared you were for everyone else in the community, more so than just yourself. I mean, that's pretty.
I mean, I was scared, but,
Yeah.
you know, I joke I have 9 lives. I always end up on my feet, you know. But my mom has COPD, and I hadn't been in close contact with her, but we didn't know how long that, you know, if it had been 2 or 3 weeks that you had been in contact with someone, not knowing how I got it, because I hadn't been around anyone sick, were just swarms of people just gonna all of a sudden be sick. So I was worried about my mom. I was worried about my daughter. I knew shutdowns were coming. So I'm, you know, being a former waitress and bartender myself, having taught before, I know these places are going to get shut down. And so how are these people going to put food on the table, pay their bills? You know, so many of us live paycheck to paycheck. We can't go 2 weeks without income. You know, it was a lot of shock and fear just kind of all wrapped up. And then, you know, my phone is going crazy.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because I find it interesting, you know, your heart's going out and pouring out to the community and being concerned for them, but at the same time, you had a lot of people that were pretty pissed off at you. I mean, and this wasn't even your fault, right? Like, nobody said, hey, you know, give this to me. But what was that moment like when you really had those people who were pretty angry with you that you had brought this to the community?
I tried to be understanding that it was a scary time for people, and that the fear of the unknown can be very, very scary for people. And so I tried to be understanding. I mean, I kind of have a rule. I don't read news comments. You know, I've tried to instill that in my daughter. But my name was out there. And I also, you know, was aware that the contact tracing was not sufficient.
Right. So there were a lot of people that didn't know that they'd been in contact with you. They were still milling around.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I decided to put a statement out.
Right.
To just say, hey, yes, the rumors are true. I do have it. You know, please let me just heal. You know, if you've been around me, I urge you to, you know, try to get a test.
And quarantine.
And quarantine and, you know, take it seriously, because I caught it out of nowhere.
Right.
But then when it came down to people threatening myself and my family and my daughter, and adults threatening a high schooler, you know, that was heartbreaking. I mean, absolutely heartbreaking. And, you know, I'm telling her, stay off social media. Don't read this stuff. Don't read this stuff. But it was so much hatred and vitriol of sharing, and people that I don't even know are texting me and emailing me and inboxing me. And there were some really great supportive people.
Right.
But when you literally receive hundreds of messages within a 24, 48 hour period via LinkedIn, Facebook, email, you know, my phone, you know, and then social media, people are sharing and sharing and sharing, and it's being shared hundreds of times. It was challenging. And so finally, it was Sunday, and I told my daughter, I said, and the media's coming at me. I mean, every media outlet possible is trying to reach me. And I'm not interested, you know, in speaking with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, she's sick through this whole time. Like, fevers, fatigue, headache, couldn't eat. I mean, so there's that physical aspect, and then there's this emotional, mental aspect. You live alone, so you're isolating on your own, as well as getting this whole barrage of...
So I finally, I told my mom and my daughter I'm turning my phone off and I'm watching American Idol. So, like, I have to get some
Right.
peace,
Right.
right? So, I put American Idol on my computer to watch it, and I'm still getting the text. It's bing, bing,
Right.
bing, bing, bing. And then I'm like, you know, it's just stop. And it didn't. I mean, it went all night long, through the night. And during this time, I'm talking to my doctor. You're one of the first phone calls I make. I have to call my boss. I have to call people I know I've come in contact with. I have to call my union. You know, I'm making all of these calls. I'm trying to reassure all these people and make sure my affairs are lined up. And I'm getting all of this other stuff and, you know, not being able to sleep, and I'm so exhausted, and I'm getting sicker by the day, and I don't know how sick I'm going to get.
Yeah, how many days? So let's clarify for people how long you were sick. How many days?
23 days of a fever. And then the blood pressure.
Right,
And, you
there
know,
are all these other shortness of breath,
all
the
this
cough.
stuff, and it was a barrage. And so, you know, Monday morning, I'm consulting attorneys, and I'm like, you know, what do I do to get everybody off my back so I can just heal? And I had to hire a publicist to put a statement out, you know, and you know, I kind of live in the political world, so there's
You do a lot for the community.
there's a blog, Capital Facts, that I love. I think Rich Miller does a great job. I read it every day, and I'm in Capital Facts. This is the first time I'm in Capital Facts. Not for
the good works that you've done.
not for, you know, any
Right.
legislation that has been passed or volunteerism or anything like that, but to beg people, please leave me alone. And it just continued. It didn't stop. I mean, probably a week or two later, I was still really sick, and I propped open my front door to just get some fresh air. It was a nice day, and somebody called the police on me.
Yeah, because you came out of your house. That you were breaking quarantine because you opened your door and sat on the porch.
I didn't even sit on the porch.
Right.
I was just letting some fresh air in.
Right.
You know, I didn't even go out to check my mail because they turned my mail off. The Postal Service stopped my mail. You know, it just.
So
it was crazy.
how do you even recover for something like that? Because you recovered from the illness, but it was such a traumatic experience. I mean, where do you even begin to?
Well, I don't think I've recovered either way. Physically, I still don't feel great. I'm still not back where I was. You know, before this, I could run around miles in heels, you know, for 12, 16 hours a day. And then months after this happened, I went and canvassed for someone and walked 2 miles, and I had to take a 2-hour nap. You know, for months and months and months, it still felt like I had a vice or a rubber band around my lungs. I still have kidney pain. My blood pressure still is crazy. So physically, I have not gotten 100% better. I feel better since I've gotten my first vaccine. And I say that hesitantly because I don't want to jinx myself.
Right.
Right. But, and then mentally, you know, we've all gone through some level of isolation during all of this. You know, we don't have the same events. We don't have the parties. My daughter didn't have a prom or a graduation. When I took her to move into college, I dropped her off on the curb. I couldn't go in and see her dorm. So we've all experienced a lot of those things, but to this day, I still feel like I have this like scarlet letter on me. You know, somebody approached me last week that I don't know, I've never met, and was asking me about it. And it, you know, ironically was an anti-masker. He refused to wear a mask, and he's,
Which is
you know,
interesting. What would someone who doesn't believe maybe in the precautions want to say to you? I don't understand that motive.
He was joking about my if I had gotten back my taste of my sense of taste and smell, which I never lost, thankfully.
Right.
Gummy bears have been my life. But you know, I don't know if he was making a joke of it, or he wanted me to know he knew, or if he was trying to be intimidating. You know, I don't know what his motive was, but it's just constant. I mean, all over the media, you know. Besides stopping the transmission of COVID, wearing a mask and a hat and sunglasses to run in the store when you have to. Like, nobody recognizes you. It's awesome. Like, I'm going to keep this mask forever. You know, but...
and very interesting, because I think people see you as maybe symbolizing bringing it to the community, but really from somebody who's working respiratory clinic and taking the calls, we really had a greater understanding of how all these other folks who had been traveling and intermingling were really part of the greater surge, probably more so than you were. So it's been interesting that,
and no one directly close to me
got
contracted
COVID,
it.
right? And so that's what I mean. So you didn't necessarily give it to anyone. You did
that
all
I'm
the
aware
right
of,
things. Yeah.
and you know the numbers were still pretty low.
They were very low.
Even in the first month or two, when
But testing was low too.
right.
Yeah.
But even in the first month or two, where it's like there were like 14 or 20, I was like, you know. And then we got to a point where it's like 200 a day, and I'm just like,
yeah, it was crazy. I was one of those. I ended up, getting it in October. So now that it's been a year since all of that, I mean, do you feel like there was something you would have done differently or said differently, or do you feel like, I just did the best I could do?
I feel like I did the best I could do at the time with the knowledge that we had.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't choose to catch it. I wasn't, not being cautious, or I was living my life like we all were. And then nobody expects or deserves to receive, threats and harassment and things like that. And so I was just, I honestly think that looking back on it, the only difference is I think I played it down more, which...
You're good at that, though. You're kind of one of those compartmentalizers.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think I was sicker than I let on to a lot of people. I spent a lot of time trying to calm other people down and let, I'm okay.
Yeah, but do you feel like you've healed? Because part of it is when you spend so much time doing that for other people, you still haven't gone through the process yourself.
Definitely. And there's all these other little quirks during this time too. My boyfriend at the time and I were having a rough spot. I actually had him blocked, and he was notified and he showed up at my house. And he couldn't handle all of it. So I'm sick. I'm being harassed. My heart is shattered. I'm so heartbroken. I am still dealing with that. My heat went out, so I didn't have heat.
You had wine, though. I did drop off some wine.
I did have wine, but I didn't have heat. I had to get a couple space heaters from people because I couldn't let anybody
in the house to fix anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Just all these little things. So I feel the past couple of weeks have been traumatizing for me.
I can't even imagine to start reliving.
I'm trying to not look back at pictures and not look back at Facebook memories, and even looking back at other people's Facebook memories where they're like, oh, this is so boring. And it's like, okay, well, I was laying there terrified I was going to die. Twice I was delusional in the middle of the night.
Fevers.
From my fevers, because even on scheduled Tylenol around the clock for that long, I was still hitting in the 103s. So without the Tylenol, who knows,
Do you feel, though, that now that we have gotten to this place where we have accessible testing, we're having the vaccinations, better treatment, do you feel like we're too laissez-faire about it?
I think a little bit. I think there's still, especially since there have been different strains and some people have not been that sick when they get it, that they're like, oh, it's
not that bad.
It's not that bad. I'm just going to be down for a week or whatever. I wrote a whole thing, I remember journaling, saying this is not the flu, because I felt like my bones were breaking. It felt like my feet were being crushed and I was in so much pain, and I've had the flu. That is not the flu.
Yeah.
So I think that people do take the approach that, we're out of it. They're going back to their normal lives.
But you're never going to go back to normal. I mean, from that experience you had, or do you feel like you're ever gonna be that person you were before then?
No, I think it's changed me. I definitely have my guard up all the time. You know, when people are threatening you and your family harm, I'm aware of my surroundings. I'm a little bit more careful. I don't trust people as much, which I didn't before. So that's like gone.
Your DEFCON is like
You know, no, I think it changed me. I think being sick like that would have been hard, but it was the harassment and the stigma
that was more traumatizing.
That, you know, just really was the icing on the cake. That, you know, I
have to ask, have you seen some of those people? Have they gotten COVID? Have they gotten sick? Or have they, and I'm not saying that I wish that on anyone, but it has been through the community, and you wonder if some of those people that stigmatized you, have they changed their position if they themselves have had the virus or as time has progressed? Anybody apologize?
No one's apologized.
Wow.
There was an article that was written, and that was one of the few media people that didn't reach out for comment, ironically, saying that I had given it to him and he was so sick, which, working in a clinic,
right?
You know, I don't mean to undermine anybody's physical health at all, but we've seen men that have colds and they completely overreact, and so I don't ever know that person was tested for COVID.
Oh, gotcha.
You know?
Gotcha. Yeah.
You know, so he was so mad at me for who I've never met, never been around. And I wasn't able to comment on that story.
Yeah.
I think it was in April, maybe the end of April, my daughter and I decided to take a drive, storm chase a little bit, wound up in Christian County at this ice cream place that I love. And I was like, oh, Taylorville, I haven't been here in a while. And she's like, they don't like you here. She's like, they were some of the worst, because she was still reading the comments.
Right.
But then it was some of those same, I'm not saying Taylorville specifically, but some same communities that were, you know, disparaging the governor for orders and concerned about high school football.
Yeah, there's all those other layers upon
so,
layers.
You know, they hated me and I'm a terrible person, but they want everything open.
Right.
And their rights are being infringed on.
Right.
You know, I have the right to be free from harassment. You know, my rights were infringed on, and you didn't see me out, you know, being mean to people. So I don't know if, I would imagine some of them had to have contracted it throughout the past year in some way, just by, you know, statistics.
Right.
So I don't know. There's so many layers to it.
So now when you are out in the community, you know, you're very good with your mask, you're pro-vaccination. Do you speak from that place of experience? Because I know this is the first time you've kind of really talked about it. Do you share those stories with other people, or do you just...
I mean, a very few close people. You know, if somebody mentions to me that they don't want to be vaccinated, you know, I'll say something like, you don't want to get COVID. Or, you know, my experience was terrible. You don't want to be as sick as I was. Somebody doesn't want to wear a mask because they have asthma, and I'm facetious, and I'm like, well, you don't want to be intubated then.
Right.
You know, so I try to get in a few snippets here and there. You know, people don't trust the vaccine. I hear that a lot. And there's this awesome documentary on Netflix about how the DNA.
Yeah, it's great.
And I want everybody to watch it so they understand.
Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett is like my hero. I want a shirt that has her on it.
So, you know, because they don't understand DNA.
And they don't understand the
and
process.
mRNA
that part of the reason why it happened so quickly was we actually made the vaccine while we were testing it, which is not something that's ever been done before.
But we also haven't gone through a global pandemic like this with the availability of science and technology. And so, you know, I do try to educate a little bit, you know, when the first person in my family, my uncle in Chicago, he's in construction, he's a pipe fitter, but they're doing a job on a hospital, so he was able to get vaccinated, I think back in January. And I damn near cried. Like, when he texted me, I was like, oh my God, it's such a relief. And then I didn't want to get my vaccine before my mom did, even though I was eligible early. So I waited a little while to make sure she was fully vaccinated, and then, you know, I went ahead and got my first one and my second one scheduled. So yeah, I'm pro-vaccine. I mean, that's the only way that we're going to rid this.
And for some people, we talk about the antibodies and getting the virus.
That was another scary part.
So, I mean, I'll let you tell that part. I don't want to tell your medical stuff.
So, because I was the first person, I was kind of the guinea pig. You know, we, in the name of science and helping other people, I'm like, do whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
Test my antibodies. Let's do all these things.
So, you know, went to an immunologist, and both Raj Govindaya and his wife, Dr. Govindaya, they have been amazing this entire time. I've had gold star treatment from everyone at Memorial. We said, hey, you know, let's test some other vaccines on me and see if they're holding and if my antibodies. So we knew that I wasn't developing the antibodies to not get it again. So I went and
after being sick 23 days, no antibodies.
So I went and donated plasma to try to help somebody else, and they tested it. You don't have enough antibodies for it to be used in a COVID patient. We'll still use it, but it can't go to a COVID patient. I did that 2 or 3 times. So I'm like, I don't want to get this again. I don't know if I can take it again. You know? I don't know if I'm going to get through it next time. So that was like another layer. I said there's so many layers that, you know, people for a while were like, oh, I got it, I'm fine, I'm never going to get it again. And I'm like, no.
And they felt like it was like the get out of jail free card. Like, I had COVID, so now I can kind of flit around and travel and not work, you know, do all these things because they were protected, but we don't know.
Right. And not everybody was getting antibody tested. I was very extensively. So, you know, we knew that I wasn't protected. You know, so that was a whole nother chapter of it as well, you know, and the follow-up visits and the labs. And
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Well, on behalf of the unkind people, I would like to formally extend an apology for those people, because I remember talking to you and how horrible it was, and you were so isolated. And my only hope is maybe if some of those people can see this, they have a better understanding of their unkindness and their words, and hopefully they will atone for that
and
behavior.
That's one of the reasons I was, you know, willing to do this with you, was because I've been avoiding media for a year. But, you know, Nikki's my friend. You know, I was one of her nurses. That's probably how a lot of you know me as well. And you know, I would never intentionally do anything to hurt anybody in any way, and then to have to deal with all that, and a year later we do know so much more. But what I want people to get out of this is that you don't know what people are going through. You know, unless you know the context, you know all of the facts, stop being so hateful. Just be kind. It costs you absolutely nothing to be kind to people. And so just, you know, you don't have to be a superhero. You can just be nice to people and not be mean.
Right. Or even if you can't be kind, just don't be anything. How about that? You know,
I would take that as well.
Because I think a lot of people really went that extra mile to intentionally be mean to you. That really that energy could have been used for other things.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that you were able to take a deep breath and move on. You know, being vaccinated, and as we kind of get through this, I hope you can trust again.
We'll see.
But I do hope that people will hear this story and maybe at least change their view or their behavior towards you or someone else maybe in the future. But I think this world and this community has a lot of healing
Absolutely.
to do. So I appreciate you being the first part of this, because I thought it was really essential to start with you.
Well, thank you for,
yeah.
and your team and the entire
Yeah.
memorial team. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it without you. Thanks for the wine. You know,
So good.
what doctor brings you wine at home delivery?
This one.
But thank you for everything
Yeah.
that you've done and trying to educate
Yeah.
people and putting, good positivity into the
Yeah.
world.
That's the only way we're going to get through it, is truth, right? Kindness.
Yep.
And positivity. That's the only way we're going to get through it. All right, my dear. Well, cheers. No wine today.
Not today.
Yeah, it was a little early, so we didn't do that. All right.
We'll see.
Peace, y'all. See you in the next shine.